What has been happening in the Hamilton real estate market? It is now a good time for you to buy or sell a home in Hamilton, as on one hand, I'm talking to sellers that are waiting for the demand to pick back up and increase prices. And then on the other hand, I'm talking to a bunch of buyers who are waiting for the market to drop further. Now, which one is right? Well, in today's video, we're going to be diving into the exact stats that have happened for the month of November in Hamilton, Ontario. Not only are we going to be looking at the overview of the entire city, but we're going to be drilling down into the specifics of what's been going on in the detached market, the townhome market, and condo market, but also taking a look further into Hamilton's individual areas and breaking down the top 10 areas of Hamilton and what markets they're in and which ones have seen the biggest price decreases, as well as the other ones that remain still in a balanced or seller's market. So let's not waste any more time and just jump on in here to the November market stats. And we'll first look at the overview section of Hamilton. So as you can see, for Hamilton as a whole, we've had 367 sales this month and 884 new listings. So this is going to be a common trend that you have seen really for the whole year, but in really the last 3 years, there's been a trend, and that is a lot more new listings compared to the number of sales. And as a result, that's why we're seeing a lot more of a balanced market today, is because this rising level of inventory we're seeing here right at the top. Now, as you see, inventory did take a little bit of a dip in the month of November compared to really the last couple of months. And I expect it to dip, as it will usually dip down at the end of the year here as less homes get listed in the month of December. And November is kind of a prelude, of course, to December. So one, we are seeing a little bit less number of new listings hit the market. However, with that said, as you see here, still well outpaces the number of sales. And as a result, our inventory compared to this time last year is 25 or 26% higher. And as a result, because of all these extra choices buyers are having, the average and median price are down about 4% and 4.5%, as you can see here. Now, if we look a little bit further at how some of these numbers here compared to the last 10 years to give you a bit more data. So we'll first zoom in over on this one, and this is going to show the number of sales per month. And as you can see, while we're actually not like at historic lows number of sales, we're kind of sitting benchmark right in the middle at 367. Now, with that said, if we go over here before we look at that one, and we look at the number of new listings per month, we are basically at the highest level we've been at in the last 10 years at 884. And here you can see they all start to really trend off into December before picking back up in the spring market of the next year. Then if we look over here in terms of the number of active listings, and this is where you're going to see the historical data and showing us that we're really in a higher inventory market than we've been in for the last 10 years. And it's not even close, as right now, our number of listings total is 2,383. And then if we look at the final one, this one here takes in the sales to new listings ratio. So it compares how many listings are getting new, how many are selling, and what's the ratio between that there. And usually the lower the number, the more likely it's in a buyer's market. So under 40% is typically referred to in a buyer's market. Over 60% is considered a seller's market. As you can see right now, for all of Hamilton, we're sitting at 35.09%. So indicating Hamilton as a whole is right now in a buyer's market. But if we look a little bit further here, this is actually going to show you not only the sales to new listing that we have just seen on these bottom charts here, and the one on the right is going to show you the historical data for the last 10 years, and the one on the left shows you the last 2 years. And what you can see is, it doesn't matter if you're looking for a detached home, a townhome, or a condo, they are all currently in a buyer's market. Now, with that said, condos are much higher of a buyer's market compared to detached homes that are just fluttering the line right here. Then, like we just saw, our sales to new listing ratio is also indicating a buyer's market. Now, in terms of the median days on market, here you can see the graphs at the bottom of this slide here. And again, we've really seen an uptick, and you'll kind of see this continue to trend upwards in the next month as a lot of homes start to sit more stale in the market during that holiday season. But as you can see, like historically, we are almost, other than like the peaks around like the holidays, we are right now sitting at a quite, it's a big graph, we'll go right here. quite high days on market. Right now, it's 33. I expect that number to probably rise in the next month as well. So that is the overview of Hamilton. Well, let's look a little bit further into the different property types, and I'll show you where they're selling as well. So we'll first look at detached homes. So detached homes are, as you see, still in a buyer's market, and we get that by the indication of the price. This time compared to last year, it's down about 5%. The number of sales is actually down this time compared to last year, at only down 2% though. However, new listings is not only basically doubling the number of sales, but it's also outpacing this time last year by 6% as well. And very similar, because like the Hamilton real estate market, like the majority of sales are going to be detached homes. The inventory is sitting at a very similar level, about 25% higher, and at 1323. So to give you a comparison, out of the whole market, we have what? 2,300. So essentially, 2/3, definitely over one half, are right now detached homes in the Hamilton real estate market. And as you see, there has been some downward pressure, but there's no like steep drop in the price in the last couple of years. And I don't expect that to happen anytime soon for detached homes. Now, if we look here at the market, we've already kind of talked about this, so I'll breeze over it quickly. Both of them are indicating a buyer's market. However, with that said, as you see, it's both just on the line here. Now, with that said, they are much higher than this time last year. The months of inventory is about 10% this time last year. Sales to new listings is interesting. It's basically the same, but the median days on market is up 10%. So adding an additional 3 days, essentially speaking. Now, here's where you're going to see where all the detached homes in Hamilton were selling. As you can see, a lot of homes were really selling on the mountain in that like 600 to 700, even 700 to 800. You get a lot more into Stoney Creek, Binbrook, Mount Hope around that 800, 900. And then you start to see a lot in that Ancaster around that like 900 to a million to 1.2. As you can see, a lot of sales are still happening here, but out of all these sales, only about 12% were selling above the list price, 85% were selling below the list price. And if you want a general rule of thumb of what they're going to sell for, the median sales to list price ratio is at 97% for the month of November. Then if we take a look at the townhomes here, as you can see, a little bit less sales in terms of compared to detached homes, and for that matter, compared to this time last year, as it's down about 20% compared to this of last year, while new listings is sitting at 209, which is up 8% this time last year. And as a result, our inventory is actually huge right now in the townhome space at 543, which is up 43% this time last year, which is why you see a bigger downward pressure in the median and average prices sitting at about 8% and 6.27%. And as you can see here, like the sales you can really see with townhomes have really flatlined, especially for this year here. And as a result, inventory continues to climb. Then if we look now at the months of inventory and the days on the market and the sales to new listing ratio, both indicating are a buyer's market like we've already discussed right here and here. What's interesting to see for me is that the months of inventory is much higher this time than last year. However, for the month of November, the sales to new listing ratio is actually down, which is showing more downward pressure into a further buyer's market, where this one here, they're both actually showing a downward pressure because this is increasing it as well. Then if we look here at where all the townhomes and semis sold, as you can see, a large chunk of them were really selling around that $600,000 to $700,000 mark, and only about 13% were selling above, 82% sold below, and 97.6% was the sales to new listing price ratio. Then in terms of the condos, this one here has seen the slowest market, and that's one of the reasons why it is in such a strong buyer's market. As you sold, for the month of November, only 19 condos have sold, where 76 hit the market. That's about, what, 4 times the amount? Exactly 4 times the amount. And as a result, that's why we're seeing new listings and inventory is only up 10% compared to this time last year. However, the inventory last year was also very, very high. So 10% on a very high inventory, as you see here, is just even higher. And that's why we're seeing the biggest downward pressure in prices in the condo real estate market. This time last year, they're down about 15 or 14% and 13% respectively. And that's indicated here, of course, in the huge buyer's market that condos are sitting in, with the average days on the market for a condo being almost double that of a detached home at 63 days. So if you look here at where the 18 amount of condos sold, basically the majority were selling in central Hamilton and Stoney Creek, really in that like 400 to 500 or 300 to 400 range. And here you can see, interestingly, 84% as well sold below the list price. So not much different in terms of what's selling above and below. However, they are typically going to be offering stronger negotiation on the buyer side. So that's why you see the median sale to list price ratio slightly below the other general rule of thumbs at 96.5%. Now that you've seen the different property types of Hamilton, let's look into how the sales broke down in each of the different regions of Hamilton and really get a grasp of what's selling more and selling less compared to this time last year. So interestingly, the Hamilton Mountain is actually up in sales this time last year at 12%. Same with Dundas. Now, with that said, Dundas, as you see, is a very supply restricted market, and it's one of the markets that's actually holding up quite well. And that's why only 9 sales is still up compared to this time last year. So still not very many sales happening in Dundas. The one that saw the biggest drop in sales were both Waterdown right here at only 31 sales and West Hamilton down about 35% in sales as well. And here you can see the breakdown of the sales in the Hamilton market in the last 12 months. As you can see, about 15% were Stoney Creek, another 26 were the Hamilton Mountain, and then other ones were distributed throughout, with East and Central Hamilton being the next ones. Now, if we keep going down here, you can see the number of new listings that are hitting the market. So while the number of new sales in the Hamilton Mountain is up this time last year, the number of new listings is still, like we've talked about, already outpacing the number of sales. So the inventory is still growing in the fastest parts that are still selling in Hamilton, like the Hamilton Mountain for there. What's interesting to see is that the Flamborough, which is a lot of unique estate properties, Carlisle, which has huge acreages as well, are actually down this time last year compared to the number of new listings. The two areas that are going to see a good amount of listings this time is Glanbrook, because of all the new builds that are coming onto the market, as well as Stoney Creek. And even for that matter, Ancaster, we're seeing a lot of new listings at above 10% compared to this time last year. And then for inventory as a whole, so taking into consideration the sales, the new listings for the last little bit, here you can see how the inventory stacks up compared to this time last year. As you see, like we talked about, Hamilton Mountain is selling good, but still 42% above this inventory compared to that last year. Inventory in Flamborough is down because of the new listings is drastically down. But across the board, as you can see, it's really up about 20-30% in the different areas. Dundas, I think, is the lowest here at only 9% up in inventory. So that's one of the reasons why it's faring the best. But Ancaster, Stoney Creek, West Hamilton, Glanbrook are all, even East and Waterdown for that matter, all up about 20-30% in new inventory. So here you see the snapshot, just quickly looking. You can pause the video if you want to take a look at this a bit further in terms of the sales, new listing, and inventory, and how it stacks up compared to the different regions. But if we look here at what market each of the different regions of Hamilton is in, as you can see, pretty much across the board, they're in a buyer's market except for 2 areas. Right now, that's the Hamilton Mountain, according to months of inventory, sitting at 3.9. So it's just fluttering around the buyer's market territory. Right now, it's sitting in a balanced market. And then same with Dundas. Dundas, surprisingly, is actually sitting in a seller's market. As you see here, it just crossed into a seller's market. I would say it's going to probably bounce back up into December and be more in a balanced market like we saw in the month of October, but we'll see what happens there. The markets that are really in the strongest buyer market, though, Flamborough, which is always typical. These homes take a lot longer to sell because they're so unique. Glanbrook, because a lot of the new real estate that's over there. Central Hamilton, because one of the areas that was hit the hardest in this downward market has been Central Hamilton. But for that matter, like Ancaster, you're also seeing is in a solid buyer's market, but not nearly as much as Stoney Creek. Now, if we look at the news to sale listing ratio for each of the regions, kind of exactly what we saw in the last one, Hamilton Mountain and Dundas are right now in basically a balanced market is what's indicating. Everywhere else is in a buyer's market. And then if we see how the median sale price compares to this time last year, what's interesting to see is some areas that we were hit harder, like I was talking about. Central Hamilton was hit decently hard. Glanbrook, Flamborough, because they're unique. The Hamilton Mountain is down 7%, but the areas that are holding on pretty well in terms of the value compared to this time last year, Dundas is doing pretty well. Stoney Creek is just around 0, down 1%, but Ancaster is up Same with the East Hamilton area as well. I imagine this number here is probably influenced by a couple of sales that happened this month. I suspect this number is closer to 0. And this number, it's probably similar to like this number right here. But here you can see over the last 2 years, as well as the last 5 years, what the median sale prices have been historically as well for your comparison. And then here's just a snapshot of the different areas in terms of what market they're in and where their current median price is. Now we can dive into a bit more of the different regions. We'll go through these ones quickly here. Now, if you want to get this PDF, I'll leave a link down below for you to download it and review it yourself. But in terms of these sales in Ancaster, because I already covered all of the main KPIs, as you see here, mainly it was just detached homes and semi-detached, no condos sold here. Majority of detached were really selling between like 1 million to like 1.5. You can find a couple of smaller ones under it, but really you're going to be finding a lot more semis and townhomes in that 700 to like 900 range right there. We've already talked about that. Ancaster is in a buyer's market. Stoney Creek, in terms of the sales, as you can see here, a lot more townhome options, a few more condo options as well, really selling in that like 500 to like 700, 800. Detached homes are really going to start in that 700, but really like 800 to like low millions for Stoney Creek for the most recent sales here. Stoney Creek, like we discussed, are both in a buyer's market right here as well. The Hamilton Mountain now, as you can see, was primarily detached homes were selling, and this is one of the areas that's the most active, like we have seen. And the vast majority of detached homes in the Hamilton Mountain here are selling between $500,000 and like $800,000, with a few condo townhomes and freehold townhomes mixed in. Then, as you see here, right now, the Hamilton Mountain is sitting in a balanced market, like we've discussed. And then we have West Hamilton over here. Not many options to choose from, only 15 sales total like we've discussed. However, the majority are selling really in that 700, we'll call it, to like $1 million mark. You'll find a couple huge ones in like the Kirkendall neighborhood that are selling for 1.5 million plus. Like we discussed, the West Hamilton is also in a buyer's market like we see here. Then as for Central Hamilton, as you can see, this is going to be the most affordable area to buy really anything. But for in this case here, detached homes are really selling between that 400 and like 600, 700,000. A lot more condo options to choose from here. This is one of the options that has the most amount of condo options. So while there are the most amount of condos for sale, there's also the most amount of sales as well. And that's why most of them are selling between that like $300,000 to $400,000 range right here. And as you can see, Central Hamilton is solidly in a buyer's market. Then if we flip over to East Hamilton here, again, another affordable area compared to some of the other regions of Hamilton. Most detached homes are really going to be selling like 400 to like 700, 800,000, with some townhomes mixed in there that were built more recently as well. And as you can see here, both of them are in a buyer's market, but not nearly as buyer's market compared to that of Central Hamilton. And then we're going to move on to Dundas. As you see here, you can just see historically the lack of supply that Dundas has. And that's one of the reasons why it holds up so great during these downward times. But it's also the other reason why it's so hard to buy in Dundas, because of the number of inventory. It's only 52 sales. And of that, like realistically, what you're searching for, it's even less than that. As you see here, for the recent sale, it's kind of all over the place. I would say for detached homes, you're looking at probably that 900 to low millions. You will find some townhomes, especially condo townhomes in Dundas, around that like 700, 600 mark as well. And as you see here, Dundas is sitting in essentially what I would refer to as a balanced market. I know this is indicating a seller's market, but I would call it a balanced market from just my experience working in Dundas for the last month. And then in terms of Waterdown, as you can see here, lots of townhomes selling here, lots of new townhome options to choose from, really in that like 600 to like 900,000, $1 million range. And then you're gonna find a lot of semis as well as detached in that like 900 to like 1.25, 1.5 for the largest homes in Waterdown. And then as for Flamborough, like I mentioned, just a lot of unique properties here. So as a result, a lot less sales, but still lots of inventory compared to that of historical times. And as you see here, because the lots usually are a lot larger, a lot are selling really in that like 900, 800 to like 2+ million for some estates that are absolutely magnificent as well. And both of these here are indicating a buyer's market. And then finally, we are going to look at Glanbrook here. And as you can see, detached homes in Glanbrook are really selling between that 700 to 900 to like $1 million if you want the biggest. but really a lot of townhomes and a lot of brand new townhome options that are some of the most affordable, like new real estate options are selling here, and lots of ones that you can buy that no one's ever lived in as well right now, in that $600,000 to like $800,000 mark, depending on what you're looking for. And as you can see here, Glenbrook is in a buyer's market. So I hope now you have a better idea of what's been going on in the Hamilton market you're looking for. If you're thinking about buying or selling in the next couple of months and want to make sure you make a smart move in 2026, then send me and my team a message today. But if you want to learn more about one of the regions a lot of my clients absolutely love making me move to, the next video I'd recommend for you is my video breaking down everything you need to know before making the move to Ancaster. So you can find that video right here. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.